ambulance. Is the patient breathing?
No, I don't know. I haven't touched him.
Okay, just tell me exactly what's happened.
Right, I don't know really what happened. He's a lodger. I wanted him out. He stabbed me in the leg. I took the knife off him. I stabbed him. He fell down the stairs. I stabbed him again because he was trying to take the knife off me.
About midnight on the 18th of April, the police got a call from a woman saying that she was in Chiltwell Street in Glastonbury and that she had stabbed her lodger.
Step away, step away, step away, step away now.
When they arrived, there was a man at the bottom of the stairs. He was unconscious.
Kick on the floor, turn over.
In an adjacent room was Dawn Lewis, who also had injuries, quite hysterical at that point.
Okay, I've got colleagues with him, just calm down.
After the paramedics and the police had tried to give as much intervention as they could, it was apparent they weren't going to be able to save his life and he was pronounced dead at the scene.
The man is 61-year-old Glenn Richards, who has lived with Dawn Lewis as her lodger for the last 8 months.
I called the ambulance. I want you here, okay?
Right.
It took ages.
Okay.
Alright, it's okay.
Bring your other hand to the small of your back.
Yeah, absolutely.
From the outset, on that initial phone call, she's saying, I was attacked by Glenn, she's got the injuries, and I've attacked Glenn, but I was scared. Is Dawn telling us the truth? Am I dealing with a murder or a self-defence killing?
Dawn was definitely into the hippie vibe. She was bright, bubbly, very much an extrovert. She liked to socialise.
In 2019, Dawn Lewis, aged 50, moves into her dream home, a large country cottage in Glastonbury, Somerset.
She was very well known in Glastonbury. She was described by some as a Glastonburian, which is someone who embraces the alternative lifestyle that Glastonbury is widely associated for.
Dawn had a really tight friendship group in Glastonbury, especially around the Chiltwell Street area. They're very, very friendly people that embraced anybody that joined that community, it would seem. So, you know, it's a typical street where if you're short of a bag of sugar, you go and ask your neighbour and your neighbour will give it to you.
I don't remember when I met Dawn first, but basically you'd meet on the street, just outside, and just became friends. We had an open door policy here.
We were actually going back and forth in between houses.
Dawn is loud, bubbly, likeable, in your face, can be too much. Dawn wants to be the life and soul of the party at all things, so she's the polar opposite of Glenn.
Dawn and Glenn first met while working in a charity shop.
Dawn and Glenn had their differences, but I think they also had quite a lot in common. They were best of friends and spent a lot of time together walking the dog. Dawn helped him in everyday life, and Glenn as well is a helping person.
He was very introverted and quite the opposite to Dawn in a lot of ways. Didn't live an exciting life, wanted to live a quiet life, didn't socialise much. Some may say dull and boring, but I think that was the type of life that he wanted to lead at that time.
Dawn being very outgoing, free-spirited. Apparently she was flirtatious. She had been in same-sex relationships, but later disclosed she was bisexual. Then we look at Glenn, straight, single man, may have picked up signals which weren't there. That will be something that only those two would have known.
It always came across that they were very supportive of each other, which is the only thing you can get from a really good friendship. I think that Glenn tried to keep her on an even keel. I think he was probably quite a reasonably good influence on her.
In 2021, Dawn invites Glenn to move in with her as her tenant.
I personally think that the only reason he moved in is because he thought he was helping her out, and as he's been doing throughout the years that they've known one another.
I can only assume that he gave up a secure tenancy to help her, because it was cash in her pocket. I could understand the benefits Dawn got from it, but I never understood the benefits that Glenn got from it.
Dawn owned the house. She had purchased the house with a previous partner, and she had taken that house on herself. Quite a big house for one person and a dog, so at some point in the past she split the upper level into a separate part of accommodation with locked doors for her part of the premises, and any lodgers would have their own part of the premises. There were separate living rooms, separate bathrooms, separate bedrooms. Glenn found it more difficult to make friends, quite solitary at times, but Dawn, through their friendship, introduced him to other people as well, so he could build himself a life in Glastonbury.
All we knew about Glenn really is what Dawn told us. It was very hard to get any sort of conversation from him. And trust me, I tried. Really tried. He was just very, very pleasant. You just couldn't get to know him.
Glenn would answer your questions. Yes would be the answer, but then he wouldn't elaborate on it anymore. He was always seemed to be pretty subdued.
Dawn would always invite him in. Oh, can I bring Glenn? I don't want to leave him on his own. So I was never sure whether Glenn actually wanted to go to these things. He would follow her like a puppy half the time. It's literally Dawn, Glenn.
For somebody like Glenn who might want a new start in life, he might find value in somebody like Dawn who has confidence, who will take risks on his behalf to help him come out of his shell. And conversely, somebody like Dawn, he can help her be a bit more introspective and a bit more down to earth. But at the same time, it's about how they respect each other's differences and personalities.
But within just a few months, Glenn's reclusive nature takes its toll on the friendship.
It feels like Glenn is getting on a bit. He's getting older. He wants to move away from that lifestyle, whereas Dawn seems to be very much trapped in that space. And I think over time that's causing a rift between them, it's causing irritation. You know, Dawn is irritated that Glenn's not her partner in crime as he used to be. Glenn's irritated about the noise and the constant disturbances. So you can see how trouble might be brewing.
After being friends for over a decade, Glenn moved into Dawn's country cottage in Glastonbury towards the end of 2021, and I think that's when their relationship really started to deteriorate.
It's quite unusual to find close platonic relationships, so it's very possible that they might have overestimated their connection and they might have initially overvalued their relationship. And of course, when they were in each other's space and living together, little issues can lead to arguments, and over time can become quite problematic.
Dawn Lewis did use Glenn to her advantage when she wanted some work doing, gardening, the rubbish taken out, the dog walking. She would look to Glenn to assist her with that. There was occasions where she banned him from using the shower except for one day a week, banned him from using the washing machine except for a particular day.
So in every coercive controlling relationship there are rules and regulations, because that person is holding the power, and then if you breach the rules and regulations there will be a consequence in some way, shape or form. And this is quite clear that Dawn was taking full advantage of that power and control over Glenn, who was at that point in a vulnerable situation. He's become submissive to her, so to speak, you know, because it was her property.
With the friendship under such strain, Dawn loses Glenn as the stabilising influence on her life.
It seemed to me that Dawn was going downhill. She seemed to be forever drinking, and she was getting more out of control.
Patricia was still a little more acceptant of her, I became a little more weary because of some of the things she would do. Kind of catch her in those porcupines that she would tell, and it's like, oh, wait a minute, she told you one thing and then told me something else, and I started backing away, going, not interested in that type of friendship anymore.
You could see she was getting agitated, and you think that's over and above normal behaviour. George and I have seen Dawn flip on a switch. It made you see her in a new light. At one point, she flipped at George and got right up in his face, and I thought, where did that come from? And kind of from then onwards, you're very wary of someone that does that, behaves aggressively, and that just switches.
If you came between Dawn and her obsession, I don't think my front door would have slowed her down. I had seen her get to the point of anger that even I got scared.
And what we saw was
scary.
Now, of course, this could have just been a one-off incident where she lost her temper in an extreme situation, but it could potentially indicate a pattern. So maybe Dawn isn't everything that meets the eye. Maybe she's actually more violent and potentially aggressive than she likes to portray herself.
By March 2022, Dawn wants to move on.
I think basically Glenn may have been an inconvenience. She got bored. She got bored with it.
She was wanting to move him out so she could bring someone else in. Someone that may have fit her scenario in her head that she needed to do what she needed to do.
She got her sights set on something else.
Whilst Glenn was living in the house as a lodger, Dawn would have a lot of friends, very much an open door sort of policy, like it was in many houses in that street.
One friend, who is well known amongst the neighbours, starts to spend more and more time at Dawn's cottage.
Our friend would come down here to party, so we'd all be at the party group. And Dawn was part of that. Because of Dawn's behaviour, our group had become more fractured to a level that I didn't want to even cross her in the street. So when our friend did come down, it was a case of we'd be here and he would then go to see the other group members on his own.
She parade him up and down the high street going, oh, my new boyfriend.
Which is what she called him. I think she was putting a stamp on him.
Dawn announces there is a new man in her life, and she lets it be known that Glenn's days at the cottage are numbered.
I know for a fact, because he told me, that she'd asked him to move in, that she was getting rid of Glenn and wanted him to move in.
But Glenn definitely didn't want to leave because he was trying to get his life where he wanted it to go.
I think maybe even possibly he thought, I made a mistake. She was supposed to be my friend. She told me that this would work.
Now frozen out of Dawn's life, Glenn has nobody else to turn to and nowhere else to go.
Dawn wanted him out. She made that perfectly clear. Glenn wanted to stay and he refused to leave. Glenn would regularly complain about the noise that Dawn was making, whether that was just her general brashness, her general loudness, throwing parties, socialising. I think it was just the world that she lived that Glenn wasn't a part of. In one text, Glenn described Dawn as a grade 1 narcissist. He would also regularly tell her that he wasn't a threat, but he wasn't moving out and he wasn't going anywhere.
Easter bank holiday weekend. The once supportive friendship hits rock bottom.
Dawn's back garden was very long, 100-odd feet up towards Glastonbury Tor, and towards the top of that garden was a teepee that she used to use to entertain guests. Glenn's bedroom at the top of the house did overlook the back garden, but you could hear what was going on at the top of the garden from Glenn's bedroom.
I remember one evening, our friend was going there, and there was a noise. Even I could hear the noise.
We do know that Glenn sent Dawn a message asking them respectively to be a bit quiet because it was disturbing him, and he also interpreted the noise they were making as a sexual act. And the conversation he had with Dawn was that she was being disrespectful to him, making that sort of noise in the garden underneath his bedroom window. I'm pretty confident in saying that probably instilled a little bit of rage in him.
When we look at Glenn and with Dawn, he might have just been jealous of her, even just friendships with anybody else, let alone if there was anything intimate between them, which we will never know. Glenn wasn't needed as much as he was before. He wasn't that calming influence now. Now Dawn has got somebody else.
The following evening, Dawn turns to a female friend, claiming what is truly happening behind closed doors.
Dawn had texted her to say she was really worried about Glenn. I'm scared of Glenn. He's really scaring me. I've got my doors locked. And my dog is behaving in a strange way. And Glenn's pacing around like a caged animal.
Dawn said that she'd become increasingly concerned about Glenn's, she described it as erratic and obsessive behaviour. She described where Glenn was caught wearing her underwear. Dawn claims that Glenn deliberately walked in on her while she was having sex.
We do know that Dawn actually said to Glenn, to stop watching me shower. Why was Glenn watching her have a shower? Was the door left open to the bathroom for him to sort of look at her having a shower? Or did he sort of impose himself and push the door open to watch her having a shower? So obviously there's lots of mixed signals going on with the relationship. This is just an explosion waiting to happen.
These are things that Dawn was saying was happening within the privacy of her own home. By all accounts, there was no boundaries in terms of Glenn's mind, and Dawn had got to the stage where she was actually telling people she'd become frightened of him. I think anyone who heard her tell that story would have shared her concern, and that was one of the reasons she says she wanted him out of her cottage.
But Dawn says despite all this, Glenn is still stubbornly refusing to leave.
He was adamant that, no, I'm not going anywhere. I haven't done anything wrong. There's no reason that you can just simply kick me out. And that frustrated her more because there was no way that she could just say, get out, you have to leave. Because he was there, he was paying the rent.
When we dig a bit deeper into exactly what the tensions were between Dawn and Glenn, we have Dawn's perspective, and she claims that he was committing some pretty odd and creepy behaviour, and there might have been, to her, some red flags of potential sexually predatory behaviour. From Glenn's perspective, he perhaps felt that she was leading him on to a degree, so harbouring this kind of resentment over time is very dangerous.
Is the patient breathing?
Hello.
Hello, is the patient breathing?
No, I don't know. I haven't touched him. He's a lodger. I wanted him out. He stabbed me in the leg. I took the knife off him. I stabbed him.
David, close. Back close.
The first people that get there, it's that situation you never want to experience as a police officer. Then emotions will start, by their very nature, running wild. Those police officers attend that night will go into professional mode, I need to save this man's life.
Right, move back. Officer the taser. Step away now. Step away.
Glenn was at the bottom of the stairs, on the floor, he was unconscious.
Move backwards. Get on the floor, turn over. Right, put your hands out. Do not make any sudden movements, you understand? We're doing it now.
They set about giving him best first aid they can. Dawn Lewis, who also had injuries, and quite hysterical at that point.
Stay on the floor.
Right, that's fine, but check him. I'm wounded, but I'm not dead.
Okay, I've got colleagues with him. Just calm down.
Okay.
Don't make any sudden movements.
Okay, just sort him out.
All right, stay still.
Okay, it's all good.
It was bloody, it was frantic. Dawn was laying on the floor, and she was actually screaming. And the fact that she referred to him as a friend showed that there was still maybe a feeling of affection there.
Right, we've got one male has been confirmed. Stabbed, he's unconscious.
The officers that initially attended were seen clearly to be treating stab wounds on his torso. It became quite clear that Glenn was in a critical condition and they wanted to give life-saving treatment there and then. So Glenn was taken out onto the street and treated on the pavement outside. This person is in their potentially in their last gasps of life, and whether they live or die is somewhat dependent on what you do at that stage. Also, dealing with the suspect still in the premises, injuries to her as well. There's so much going through these officers' minds.
Right, listen, I'm going to approach you, okay? Don't make any sort of movements.
No, love, I'm not. I called the ambulance and want you here, okay?
Right.
Right, it's okay.
Bring your other hand to the small of your back.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right, at this moment in time, you're under arrest for GBH with intent. You don't have to say anything, but the main defence is do not mention one question or something which later on in court. Anything you do say may be given evidence. Do you understand?
Despite the emergency service's best efforts, Glenn Richards is pronounced dead at the scene.
My job is to come in the next day and go to be briefed on the case, what we knew so far, and what needed doing afterwards. Ultimately, though, in my role, I want to understand exactly what's happened within that scene as early as possible, to see how we can best interpret that scene to either disprove or prove that the victim was murdered, how, with what, and by who.
Officers waste no time and cordon off her home as a crime scene.
They had literally shut off the street in front of her house. You immediately go, what the heck's going on? You go out and the police are going, no, get back in your house, you can't come out.
It was just police walking up and down the road, and we didn't have a clue what had happened.
It's something you would not expect. No, you never expect something like that.
When we first arrived as the police, we tried to interpret as best as we can. What was quite apparent right from the start was that where Glenn was lying when we found him was potentially not the place that he was attacked. We found a number of knives. The first knife that we found was indicated by Dawn that is the knife that Glenn used to attack her, and then she subsequently used to attack Glenn. In one of the living rooms on a shelf, we found a knife very similar in description to what we believe to be the murder weapon. And also in Dawn's bedroom we found a further knife as well.
The knives are sent off to forensics for analysis, while Meade attempts to make sense of the scene inside Dawn's cottage.
All we know is that she said she stabbed her lodger because he attacked her. What I can say at that stage is that there was a particular area in his bedroom which would indicate there had been an attack in there. There was also quite clear evidence that somebody with a bloodletting injury had come down the stairs at some point, whether that's fallen, walked. And then we also know that there was pooling of blood at the bottom of the stairs, which was consistent with where Glenn was found when we first arrived. All I'm left with at that stage is almost a blank canvas of me then having to piece together what's happened from using her initial call.
Is the patient breathing? Hello? Hello, is the patient breathing?
No, I don't know. I haven't touched him.
Clearly Dawn is upset, but she's still compos mentis. She's still able to have a normal conversation and answer questions. I'm intrigued about the veracity of her appearing to be upset and distraught.
Just tell me exactly what's happened.
Right, I don't know really what happened. He's a lodger, I wanted him out. He said no. I went to the door, he stabbed me in the leg.
It's quite shocking how sort of calm she is, you know, the initial hello. If you stab somebody, you would be hysterical on the phone.
I took the knife off him, I stabbed him, he fell down the stairs, I stabbed him again because he was trying to take the knife off me.
Dawn was claiming self-defence. She claimed she thought that her life was in danger. If Dawn's story was true, then It's an incredibly scary experience.
She's going into a lot of detail about what's happened. Certainly tells us that she stabbed him a number of times. But I just have the opinion it's all about Dawn Lewis. It's all about, I'm fine, don't worry about me, worry about Glenn, I've done this horrible thing to him because he was horrible to me, but let's all worry about him now. Just the underlying thing to me is it's about self-preservation.
I've called you, and you just know about his breathing.
Does she come across as believable? You listen to that call, is that somebody that's in shock, or is that someone who's genuinely upset? I don't know. We have 24 hours initially to interview Dawn. Obviously I want her treated for her injuries first to make sure she's comfortable so I can get the best opportunities to get the best interview I can out of Dawn Lewis, to find out exactly, in her opinion, what's gone on within that house.
Dawn is ready to be questioned in custody.
She was interviewed 7 times over the next 2 days, and throughout those interviews she answered no comment to all the questions we asked her. She's not denying in her initial calls that she stabbed Glenn. What she's saying is, I stabbed him in retaliation to him stabbing me, or in self-defence, to protect herself. Is Dawn telling us the truth?
Neil Mead has just 24 hours with Dawn in custody before he must either charge or release her. He turns to Glenn's past and makes a shocking discovery.
I found out that Glenn had a previous conviction himself. Back in the early 2000s, Glenn had been convicted of killing his wife.
Glenn's horrific past conviction changes the entire focus of the investigation. Police immediately delve deeper into his past.
Glenn was an ex-sergeant in the Metropolitan Police. He got married in 1992, but by 1998 their relationship and their marriage had completely fallen apart. Glenn had suspected his wife of having an affair, and his jealousy turned into rage and hatred.
We know he was released from duties due to mental health. It probably would have been intent. If I can't have it, nobody else will. A restraining order was put in place. And for him to breach it as well, he's showing that he doesn't care about authority, that, he's going to do everything he can to get her back.
Glenn had become obsessed and wasn't willing to let her go. He was described at the time as being a control freak, very jealous, and someone his wife feared so much she had a panic alarm fitted at her home that caught the devastating attack on camera.
Glenn hangs outside the family house. His wife takes their children bowling, and after she returns, he knocked on the door. When she answered, he stabbed her 4 times in the chest and he killed her in front of his own 2 sons.
We can see that he was a perpetrator of abuse and coercive controlling behaviour, and he did the ultimate.
Glenn appears in front of a judge at the Old Bailey in March 2002.
Glenn ended up getting a comparatively light sentence, so instead of a charge of murder, he got diminished responsibility, which downgraded it to manslaughter. And that would have been in the context of his mental health issues. This is the kind of case that I give evidence for regularly as an expert witness and forensic psychiatrist. So what it would have meant is, at the time, he and his defence team would have proved that Glenn had a mental illness which affected his ability to understand his own conduct, or to form a rational judgment, or to exhibit self-control. In terms of the impact that the murder that Glenn committed would have had on his children, it would be utterly devastating. They would have to mourn 2 parents, their mother who was killed, and also their father who would then go to prison for many, many years.
In 2011, Glenn was released from prison on a life licence and probation, supposedly rehabilitated, obviously trying to keep his head down and just sort of integrate in society.
Is that conviction relevant to this investigation? Obviously it's relevant. He's killed somebody in a domestic circumstance before with a knife. Is Dawn telling us the truth? She's living with a proven violent man that's previously taken her life. Does that add more credence to her story that she was defending herself? Or was she using that as a lever to, again, get people to believe that what she does was in response to him attacking her and her being scared?
Well, to be honest, with Glenn, none of us knew about his history. All we knew about Glenn really is what Dawn told us. It was very hard to think that he would have done that.
Neighbours discover why Glenn was so desperate to stay at Dawn's cottage.
He had the plan in his head that he wanted to meet up with his son. He was striving very hard to accomplish that. So in order not to go back to prison for what he had done, he was doing what was ever required of him to stay out of trouble.
There was a plan for Glenn to meet his sons, and part of the probation, the conditions, was a fixed abode. So he needed to stay at Dawn's place to show he was trying to move forward with his life. And Dawn knew that. She almost used it as a tool of manipulation, knowing that she could push the boundaries a little bit, and it would be very hard for him to try and move out.
To me, this is really a unique case. You know, you've got somebody who was a perpetrator of abuse to all of a sudden become the victim of somebody who's more controlling than you. But he still would have had that element of abuse and control and coercion because he was a perpetrator. But he's got to suppress that for his future.
There's no dispute that he was stabbed by Dawn. The dispute is the reason why Dawn stabbed him.
Faced with two aggressive individuals and no witnesses, Neil Mead needs a breakthrough.
Dawn had 3 stab wounds to her right thigh. Very linear. We had a comment made by a doctor in A&E saying these injuries are self-inflicted. That obviously pricked my ears up when I was told that. If you get stabbed once, however deep it is, you're going to move because it hurts. So to stand there while she's stabbed 3 times in the leg and not move because these injuries are literally in a line down her leg, again, sort of increased my suspicion that they may well be self-inflicted.
This is an incredibly hard thing to do psychologically because you want to make the wound deep enough for it to look credible, but at the same time, it's going to be petrifying. You're going to want to minimise the amount of pain and the amount of injury and disability.
That's so unusual for me. I've never experienced it before. It made a real strong suggestion to me that there may be more to this case than initially seen.
Neil Mead returns to the crime scene and considers the layout of Dawn's historic country cottage.
There had been an assault that led to a bloodletting injury in the corner of his bedroom. So my view was at that stage, why would she then go into his bedroom? You know, you're scared of somebody, why go into their domain essentially? Why go into the lion's cage if you're scared of them? So for me as a senior investigator, I'm saying at that stage, there's nothing more I can do with Dawn in custody. This is as far as I can take this. I'm going to go to the CPS and ask if I can charge.
Dawn Lewis is charged with the murder of Glenn Richards.
It was shortly after that when our friend made a panic knock at the door.
The man who Dawn described as her boyfriend has unexpectedly arrived at Chilkwell Street.
He looked terrible, absolutely awful. He was in shock. You just knew something was wrong, so he brought him in and we just went, "What's wrong?" He said, "I think I've missed something out, and I think it might be the nail in the coffin." I went, "Right, don't tell me anymore. You need to phone the police."
As an investigator and leading the investigation, I'm keen to know what he's got to say.
The man Dawn Lewis sometimes described as her boyfriend gives a statement to the police.
Earlier in the evening, he's had a video phone call from Dawn. And during that video call, he says that she's obviously upset with the situation with Glenn, but then goes to tell us that on that video call, Dawn is waving a knife around, and she says, what should I do? Should I just stab him and then stab myself and make out that he attacked me? And Dawn turns and shows him right at the top of her thigh. From where he indicates she was going to stab herself is exactly where Dawn stabbed herself, literally hours before she killed him.
I'm going to stab him and then I'm going to stab myself. And what happened? That was within hours of it happening. So was she scared of him, of Glenn? No, she bloody well wasn't.
The police hand over the new incriminating evidence to the CPS, and the murder trial of Dawn Lewis begins at Bristol Crown Court.
At the start of any murder trial, there's quite a lot of anticipation. The courtroom reflected the community. There were supporters for both Glenn and for Dawn. But if Dawn was able to prove that she did act in self-defence and the jury believed her story, then she would walk free from court at the end of the trial.
Dawn pleads not guilty to murder.
Through this case, what was always in my mind was, I have got a man that he's got a violent past and had previously taken somebody else's life in really horrific circumstances. So right through this trial, it was always on the balance.
The prosecution opening began by playing a 999 call.
He's a lodger, I wanted him out. He stabbed me in the leg. I took the knife off him, I stabbed him again.
It began by playing the police body-worn footage, which shows Dawn being arrested.
Move backwards, move backwards. Get on the floor, kick on the floor, turn over, turn over.
They really tried to paint a picture and bring to life the horror of what had happened in that home in Glastonbury into the courtroom.
The prosecution called George and Patricia to the witness box.
It was stress. I didn't want to be there, but you have to do your thing. You have to say it as it is. Which is hopefully what I did.
You looking at Dawn sitting in the dock, and you don't want to be the person to say something that puts it over the edge, but I have to be honest.
You didn't know whether it was going to stick, or whether she was going to get off, or how long it was going to be. Are you free, or are you then at risk? That was my fear.
Next to give evidence is the Home Office pathologist who conducted Glenn's post-mortem.
Glenn sustained 5 stab wounds to the torso, and at least one of those would have been fatal. Also, there were some wounds to his hands, suggest that he may well have put up a fight against the knife. At this stage, Dawn's story could be true. The injuries to Glenn could be caused in a way that Dawn said they were caused.
In order to defend herself, Dawn Lewis takes the stand.
Dawn was very respectful of the court. She was tidy, presentable. She was portraying herself as a very meek and a mild and very helpful person, saying he came at me with a knife and attacked me, and I've stabbed him, and he subsequently died.
It's very uncommon for a woman to kill a man in a domestic dispute. You know, she's in this situation where she has a lodger who's acting sexually inappropriately, quite creepy towards her. She wants to kick him out. He refuses to go, particularly on the background of the fact that he actually killed his own wife many, many years ago. So it seems convincing to me.
She told the court about how Glenn had started fantasising about how he would have carried out the killing of his former wife differently. She said at one stage, I was terrified that he was just going to jump out and kill me, and claimed to be living with that constant fear. Really trying to paint a picture that she was terrified that she was going to die in the attack, and really playing on the emotions and the fears that generated. What she didn't count upon is her friend coming forward. As a journalist, you try to go into things with an open mind. You're not there to judge yourself, you're there to report on the facts and the evidence as it's been presented to court. But there are some moments in trials, clearly, when it has an impact.
The man Dawn used to describe as her boyfriend takes the stand.
The poor guy spent 2 full days in the witness box. That is stress. I mean, he was just coming down here for a relaxing day with the buddies, and all of a sudden he's in the middle of a murder trial.
He details their video call for the jury.
It was not just the fact that he'd outlined the murderous intent of Dawn that day, but it was the level of detail and description in which Dawn had described the attack that she planned to him, including physically mimicking a stabbing motion and how she would then claim self-defence. That for me was such compelling evidence that I feel really Dawn struggled to come back from.
Dawn probably thought by telling her friend what she was going to do that they weren't going to disclose her plans to the police, but to have that self-assurance speaks volumes of what Dawn was as a person. She'd got such power and control over Glenn that perhaps she thought this was spilling into the friendship with this new person she was friendly with.
After the closing statements, the jury retire.
Ultimately, it came down to, did they believe what the friend was saying? If they believed what he was saying, they couldn't do anything but convict. I genuinely didn't know what the jury were going to find.
The concern was that when we came home, she'd be in her house, knowing that we had sat on the stand going, this is what we heard, this is what we seen. She may have animosity towards us, and the next thing you know, you're the next target. So, yeah, it was fearful because we didn't know whether or not it was going to be safe to come back to your own home.
The jury deliberate for 9 hours. They come back 11-1 guilty for murder. The judge accepts a majority verdict, and Dawn Lewis is sentenced to life in prison with a minimum term of 20 years.
One of the most moving parts of the whole proceedings for me was listening to Glenn's son's victim impact statement. He witnessed Glenn kill his mother as an 11-year-old child and hadn't seen Glenn since that fateful day. But it also transpired that just 2 weeks after Glenn died, he was due to meet Glenn for the first time through a restorative justice programme, where he was finally able to speak to Glenn and try to bring a small amount of closure for what happened 20 years previously. Dawn cheated him of the chance to confront Glenn about what had happened, and for that he can't feel anything but complete and utter disgust.
She's been exposed as a very manipulative person that was quite happy to kill somebody else to get to her own means. She wanted Glenn moved out of the house. There was an easy solution to it. One phone call to probation and they would have moved Glenn out of that premises. But she chose to concoct a story where she could kill Glenn.
In my eyes, Dawn's a typical perpetrator of abuse. She's reeled, basically, a vulnerable person in, regardless of what he's done prior to that. As a convicted killer, with his past history as well, he would have been controlling and jealous. But I do believe this instant that Dawn was the more controlling and dominant person in this relationship, and he had to be submissive and vulnerable because he had one goal ahead of him, and that was to build some sort of relationship with his sons.
Dawn will be in prison until at least 2042, but the shadow of her crimes still hangs heavy on the once happy neighbourhood where she lived.
This is my home forever. It absolutely disrupted the street here. There were great friendships down here, but now everybody's got kind of secluded now. It put fear into a lot of people where there was no fear before.
From someone that you thought was your friend, I think that she honestly believed that she was going to get away with it.
Police emergency.
Hi there. Okay. Hello. I need police and a forensics team to my address, please.
What do you mean? What's happened?
My friend and I got into an altercation, and I'm the only one who came out alive.
Are you telling me you've killed somebody?
Yes, I am.
Right, and who am I speaking to?
When police investigators arrived, they found a very violent and brutal attack.
The body of schoolboy Breck Bednar lies in an Essex flat.
Breck is a young gamer. He's only 14 years old.
He was on his back with his arms underneath him. It was a very unusual position. He was still bound by duct tape behind his back. It was unique for myself and for Essex Police, really, because of the nature of the way it was carried out.
This didn't look to be a simple case of murder. He'd had his throat cut, and it was clear that Breck died in a very awful way.
I tried for years to have Breck when I decided I wanted to have a family. And it did take quite a long time. So when he came, I was over the moon.
Breck Bednar was born in London to US citizen Lauren Lefebvre and her then husband Barry.
I say he was my first love and my most important love. And I've said this before, and it's not nice to my husband, but, men can come and go, but your firstborn turns you into someone you've never been. They make you a parent. And I loved being a mother.
Lauren, who is a teaching assistant, notices that Breck has a natural ability with anything technical.
He was a clever boy, and as he grew, you could tell that he loved playing and doing with anything that he could build or make or fix. From a young age, he would, if there was a remote control, I'd find him taking it apart, putting it back together, a radio, any sort of gadget. In fact, we sometimes called him Brecky Gadget, because he just would have everything, studying how it worked and how it was put together.
He was smart, he was funny, he was caring, but he was also a typical older brother. He was embarrassed of me at school. He never liked to admit that I was his sister, and I would wave at him and he would be embarrassed, but he was always there for me if I needed.
Right from when he was 8 to 10 years old, he could use a computer much better than I could, and I just lost ground after that and never caught up. But he just had that knack.
I remember Breck playing tons of games online, and me and my siblings were just fascinated by whatever he was playing because he was always the best. He would always win. I just preferred watching. We didn't see any danger to it because we were just so impressed by how well he was playing and how much it made him happy that he was playing and that he had an audience.
His passion was anything to do with computing, and those were the kind of friends that he made within school. And they invited him into a gaming group. And for me, it felt safe because I knew those boys and I knew their families. I knew where they lived. For him, it would have felt comfortable because he had known them since he was young. And that's when he started spending more time gaming online.
Breck has a particular passion for a game called Battlefield 4, and he's playing it obsessively with his friends.
At the beginning, I was happy that Breck was enjoying his friends from school. Because of the divorce, he had to switch schools a couple of times. And I think that's a really hard thing for a kid to do. And I was glad that he was having fun. I could sort of relate to why he was enjoying, the excitement of the games they were playing together.
I remember the first time I heard James's name. and I was just like, oh, Breck's got a friend. And I was all excited. I mean, he had plenty of friends at school, but it wasn't a school friend. It was like a new online friend, which seemed fun because it was somebody not from school. It was maybe somebody from a different area, which could have been exciting.
Breck and his friends play on a server, a private group within the online game they played. It was run by a teenager called Lewis Daines, who is just 4 years older than Breck.
I remember the day, the door was open, he was having a good time, but I heard a different voice than I had heard before, and it was deeper, it was more in charge, it was more in control. When I asked Breck about this new person who I didn't recognize, Breck wasn't worried at all. He said the other boys have been gaming with him for years.
Daines impresses the younger schoolboys with stories about his life.
Lewis Daines told the online gamers who formed part of the server that he ran that he was a successful software engineer who was living a high life. He told people that he fleeted between New York, in Syria, and also that he was working with the US government, and that he was working for Microsoft as well. So he very much portrayed himself as somebody who was a high flyer in the gaming world.
Daines tells the boys he left school early to pursue his dreams.
He's saying that, you know, you don't need to go to uni, you don't need education, look how successful I am, and I made my own way, I create my own success.
Some of the boys soon begin to look up to him as their leader.
I think Daines was, by all accounts, very charismatic. He was articulate, he was funny, he was friendly, which of course would make the online gamers want to interact with him and ask for his advice.
When I would go into Breck's room, the door was open. He had 3 screens, and on one screen was the names of all the gamers, and then the action was in the middle, and then there were pictures of some of the gamers' live feeds. And the thing was, Daines never had his face showing. And so I would say to Breck, well, why isn't he showing his face? And Breck's like, oh, because he does some important work, so he keeps private. I tried to Google him. I couldn't find any photos. I found it unusual that the boys were showing their face, but the person we didn't know was keeping his identity hidden. This person who we didn't know would chat with me, and he'd say, hey, Mom, how are you? And I'd say, oh, good, yeah, it's sunny here. What's it like in New York City? And he'd say, oh, it's a bit cold. No, oh, what have you been doing? Oh, I can't really go out much. I'm working all the time, really, really busy. And I'm just thinking, come on, you're 17 years old. You're living in New York City, supposedly, and you don't have anything to say, like not a show, not a gig. And he never seemed like he was on New York time zone. So I had huge doubts that he was actually in the States, and I always felt like he could have been, 2 streets over. There was only one time that any of the boys saw what Daines looked like, and it was when Breck and one of his friends met Daines on a live stream in a very darkened room, and Daines barely let them see his identity, but they saw it enough to be able to tell that he was actually a teenager like them. And I think that was really a pivotal point, because at that point they thought Breck's mom is so paranoid. He's not a creepy old guy. He is a teenager like us. And I think they let their guard down then. At the beginning, all of the guys were looking up to Daines and thinking he was amazing.
14-year-old Breck Bednar's mum is concerned about a mysterious gamer called Lewis Daines, who has invited her son to join his gaming server. Records of the group's online conversations show talk was often steered towards the topic of sex.
Lewis was pushing the boundaries, so there would be a lot of dick talk. There would be a lot of talk about calling each other homos, that sort of thing. When you're online, there aren't the normal socialising controls. You could say what you want, when you want, how you want, because there aren't the same sort of consequences. So therefore, things escalate very quickly.
The first time I kind of noticed that something was wrong or something was off was when my mum, my dad and I had gone to pick up Breck from Air Cadets. And we were driving home, it was dark, and I was just in the back. And they were yelling at Breck because I think he wanted to quit Air Cadets or something. Everyone was yelling, saying that Breck was spending way too much time on the computer and spending too much time gaming. And I really took no notice. It just seemed like a typical teenage thing where I understood that parents might not want their children on games 24/7, but I never could have imagined it was something more sinister.
One of the things that Danes did was try to turn the boys against parents with all their rules, So when Breck had joined Air Cadets because he wanted to be a pilot, and he loved it at the beginning, Danes started sort of making fun of anything that was establishment, anything that was organized, anything that you had to wear a uniform, that you had to show up at a certain time.
It's no secret that a lot of teenage children want to disassociate themselves from their parents. They're joining maturity, they're going through puberty, they want some autonomy. So it's a very natural thing for a teenager to want to rebel. But what's unusual about this case is the way that it escalated.
Danes started then to sort of turn Breck against everything, including religion and government and politics. It was like he was anti-everything.
Disturbed at the influence Louis Danes is developing over her son, Lauren attempts to confront him directly.
I wanted to see him face to face, like Breck did with his other friends. I wanted to have a face-to-face chat in his room. And I had offered to meet up in person as well in a public place. But Breck said, no, he doesn't want to meet you. He doesn't like parents and he thinks you're too judgmental.
I remember my parents saying, why doesn't he want to meet in person if he's legit? Or why doesn't he want to meet the family?
I kept saying to Breck, I want to talk to him. And finally Breck said, okay, he's agreed to chat with you, but on Messenger. We live messaged back and forth. And I remember saying, why are you trying to turn Breck against religion? Why are you trying to turn Breck against school? Why are you trying to pull him away from family activities? And he just would say, well, Breck's a good boy. Why are you forcing him to do things that he doesn't want to do? Why are you forcing him to do things that make him unhappy? Breck's clever. Breck's so smart. He was like telling me about my own son. I got angry because it wasn't getting anywhere. He wasn't answering why he was trying to change Breck. He just kept telling me how great Breck was.
Lauren suspects that Danes is planning for Breck and the other boys to take part in a covert operation.
I sort of thought maybe he was grooming the boys for some sort of terrorist activity.
He would say that he was running Syrian refugees through a pipeline into other countries. He would portray himself as somebody who was part of the intelligence community. And a lot of the content that he was sharing was to do with terrorism and, quite nasty footage.
And I thought he was going to get them to do some mass hack on school or government computers, and they'd take the fall and he would get away with it. Maybe he'd put them on a big mission with real guns and get them to do something horrible. That went through my head. I sensed something was wrong. I just didn't know how to fix it. I was scared when I phoned the police because I wasn't sure. In my heart, I felt sure, but I didn't have proof. And I phoned the police and I literally said, I need to speak to the department that deals with grooming.
In desperation, Lauren contacts Surrey Police, but they struggle to understand her concerns.
I feel my son and his friends are being groomed by this guy who runs the server. And they said to me, what's the server? And I went, I don't know, it's where they get together and game. So it was like almost the blind leading the blind in this conversation.
Okay. And what sort of concerns do you have then? I mean, obviously there's that age difference, but what if he tells?
He's trying to turn him against everything. He's grooming him for something because he's trying to change his thinking set on everything.
I think for grooming, the offence back then was that you had to arrange to meet on 2 separate occasions for it to be grooming. And of course, this just doesn't meet the criteria. It's just a 14-year-old gaming online with an 18-year-old.
It scares me, you know. I don't know if he's trying to groom them to become part of his group.
Yeah. Well, we'll do some research on this end, and you've got the reference number there if you do find anything, you know, like his contact number or anything.
Basically, I was told 3 times that intelligence would be checked, that they would look into it.
But the police decided not to take the case any further, and it later emerged that Dane's name was not even checked on the police national computer database.
Surrey Police, this, for them, it was maybe an 18-year-old undermining a mum's position with a 14-year-old.
That was then when I organised a meeting with other parents, and we sat the boys down 2 days later and literally said, look, we're worried.
Lauren and her ex-husband Barry outline a plan of action.
They decide that an intervention is in fact needed to physically tear Breck away from the relationship with Danes. So Breck was told that he can no longer go online. His computer was going to be taken away from him.
And so I even, said, I think you're being groomed. And Breck said, well, that's a harsh term to say grooming.
Breck and his friends idealise Lewis. Breck is young, he's only 14, perhaps a little bit childish, perhaps naive, but also Lewis, I think, is very cunning, deceitful and very manipulative.
Unbeknown to Lauren and the other parents, Lewis Danes is spying on their meeting.
Danes had asked Breck to record that meeting, and he had a little MP3 player in his pocket, so he was able to get that meeting recorded.
It's going to sound weird, but there's no one else who sort of I their interest with. Not in real life, in gaming. There's not that connection where you have sort of mutual interest.
It could be just one way to assert his dominance and control over Breck to show who's in charge. It could be to set up this dynamic of them being very much in it together. You know, so Lewis is saying to Breck, it's me and you versus your mother who's making life difficult for us.
Danes kept the recording and even made a version where he added his own commentary.
It's quite chilling, really, because you've got the two of them arguing in the background and Lauren arguing with Breck, and he's just in this monotonous voice. This is Lauren, the mother of Breck. Look at her and the way she's trying to control, and he's just weird. It's very strange.
With the recording in his possession, Danes has the upper hand.
At that point, Danes knew what we thought of him. He knew we were onto him, that we didn't like him, that we didn't trust him, that we didn't believe him, and it became more dangerous because everything went underground. After we forbade the boys from gaming or speaking or socializing to Danes, Breck went back to acting like his happy-go-lucky self.
After hearing the outcome of the meeting, Danes secretly sends Breck a mobile phone so he can continue to communicate with him in private.
I thought everything was better. We didn't talk about, Danes anymore because I thought he was out of the picture.
The family spent Christmas together, and then into the new year, Breck went away on his trip to Spain. And sadly, that was the last time that Lauren saw Breck alive.
And I remember our last little meal together was Taco Bell, because that was my favorite naughty treat. And he ate just so, he was just such a good eater, because he would just enjoy it, and he could just put it away even though he was tall and thin. And I just remember enjoying that time with him because it was just us. It was a special time. And so I'm at least happy to know that he did have good times with me. And he would have known somewhere deep inside of him that I wasn't the bad guy.
Lauren hopes the school trip to Seville in Spain will mark a fresh start for Breck.
We hugged and kissed and said goodbye, and I just remember feeling so proud. And as he walked away, I thought how handsome he was.
When he was with the school party, he posted online him sitting next to a girl. Lewis Daines didn't like this. Lewis was berating him for putting a picture up online of him with a girl, and why would you leave yourself open to other people making a comment about you and this sort of thing on Facebook? So Lewis obviously didn't like the fact that Breck was socialising with other people.
Lauren goes abroad on holiday herself, satisfied Daines no longer has a hold over Breck.
He texted me when he was away on the trip, and he just said, "Oh, it's amazing here, Mom. The food and the people, we're having such a good time." And I was so pleased, because I thought, this is exactly what I want for my kids. Life experiences outside of their bedroom and the computer, you know. And I honestly, I thought everything was on track. I really did. I hate to admit how wrong I was.
Breck returns from Spain and he goes to stay with his dad. And the next day he tells his dad that he is now going off to stay the night with his friend.
Breck doesn't reveal that the friend is Lewis Daines, who has ordered a cab to take Breck and his computer equipment on a 31-mile journey to his flat in Grays, Essex.
Now this is moving quite quickly into a real-world interaction between Breck and the man who has been grooming him.
He has this idealised, almost fictional version of what he thinks the attacker's going to be like. It's somebody that he respects, somebody that he admires, and he turns up to the house and he suddenly realises that this is some sort of trap.
Essex Police Emergency.
Hi there. Okay. Hello. I need police and a forensics team to my address, please.
What do you mean? What's happened?
My friend and I got into an altercation, and I'm the only one who came out alive.
Are you telling me you've killed somebody?
Yes, I am.
Right, and who am I speaking to?
My name is Lewis Daines. I'm 18 years old.
Right, okay. And what's actually happened?
My friend came to stay the night with me yesterday, feeling very down, feeling suicidal.
One of the features is this kind of inappropriate politeness. You know, the way that he's initially really polite to the dispatch person. He's not really behaving like somebody who has just killed somebody.
And I woke up this morning, he was in a mess. I tried to calm him down. I hugged him, then said that I was there for him. He shrugged me off.
You'd expect the caller to be much more emotional. They would want to get help there and then, now.
You're telling me he is definitely dead?
Yes, I'm telling you he's definitely dead.
It just seems very methodical and thought through. He's talking as though he's rehearsed this call in his mind.
Okay, but why did he come to stay with you?
Because he was fed up with his home life.
Right, because he was fed up with his home life.
He's had a lot of problems. I've known him for a long time.
He goes into a lot of detail, and I can only assume that he's thought about this and he knows that he's going to rely on this as his defence.
He claims that Breck is incredibly unhappy on the home front, you know, wanting to commit self-harm, suicide.
What's happened this morning?
I woke up. He was just standing up. He was in a mess. Hands on his face. I got up, I put my arms around him, and I said it was okay. He just shrugged me off and said no. I can't remember exactly what he said. He was going on about how he didn't want to go home. He was fed up with his life. And he he didn't want to go. In my room, adjacent to my bed, I have a chest of drawers. I had a penknife on there, folded. He picked it up, opened it, and then lost control.
Slow down. Let me just take those details. There's a penknife on the bedside table. Brett grabbed this.
Yeah.
What, in order to harm himself?
No, in order to harm me. He opened it and then lost control.
Lewis Danes is basically saying Breck came at him with a knife, and so Danes, in his mind, had to just resort to self-defence and ended up committing murder.
I, in self-defence, put my left arm up to block him from stabbing me effectively. We struggled. I got him to the ground. He got up. I grabbed the knife and I stabbed him once in the back of the neck, I believe somewhere near the brainstem. He turned around, tried to carry it on. I don't remember exactly what happened, but the fight ended with me cutting his throat. I believe I turned around and I slashed his throat.
Oh, it's just shocking. Incredibly difficult to listen to. People are harmed and killed in acts of self-defence. I mean, that does happen. I suspect that he does feel that by himself calling the police demonstrates the level of confidence he has that he may well get away with this.
My first reaction walking into that flat was how tidy it was. It was clean, it was tidy, there was no indication that anything untoward had taken place in that flat.
Lewis Danes is arrested at his home. Shortly after, Essex Police's digital forensics officer Clifton Pell searches the property.
I was shown around the lounge, I was shown around the kitchen, and there was the bedroom. And I opened the door and Breck was still lying there, covered in blood and with his throat cut. And when I looked across the bed, there was just blood all over the bed, and there was blood on the laptop as well. So, yeah, you take a deep breath and you feel really sad and really sorry for a life that's been taken.
I have a very clear sequence of events that day. It's just completely stuck in my mind. So I walked home from the park and I see these two police cars outside my house, which I thought initially was strange. And all of a sudden these two lady police officers, they came up to me. The police told me that I had to call my dad and tell him to come home, which is what I did. I called my dad, he was working, and I said that the police were at the house and they're saying that you need to come home. And he came in and all of a sudden there was just screaming and yelling and shouting, and we were so confused. We had no idea what was going on.
Chloe discovers that in the moments after the killing, Danes delivers a final message to the gamers on his server.
Danes had sent images of Breck's body to Breck's friends, and in turn Breck's friends communicated and messaged Breck's siblings to more or less say, if this is what's happened to Breck, we're really sorry for your loss.
I just remember being in my room, just crying and screaming, and I was just suffering alone basically. Just having to read this about my brother is just so hard to think about.
I'd only been in Spain a couple of days, and I woke up with an impending sense of doom, and I didn't know why, and I ran through my head, why do I feel this weird, heavy feeling?
Shortly after breakfast, Lorin's phone rang.
I got, this is the worst call any parent could ever get, and it was Dad that said, I don't know how to tell you this, but Danes has killed Breck. And my life ended, really. I could have died right then and there. I couldn't stop screaming. I just couldn't believe it. And I fell to the ground and screamed until they brought in a doctor.
to give me something to calm me down. And it's just so hard to have something so horrible that you just can't take back and you can't fix. There's no fixing it.
For a digital forensics analyst, the challenging thing is to make sure you don't lose evidence.
And Pell faces an immediate problem. Danes had taken care to cover his tracks.
In the bathroom, the sink was full of water, but there were 3 mobile phones in there, and there was 2 hard drives and also an electrical board in there. So the implication was that Lewis Danes had tried to corrupt or do something with the electronics that were actually in that sink.
Pell and his team race to recover the data that Danes has attempted to destroy, while other officers look into the killer's background.
It quickly became apparent that Lewis Danes wasn't the high-flying computer engineer that he was claiming to be.
They find he lived with his grandparents after his mother moved abroad with a new partner.
And there are reports that he was in and out of different local authority care homes. At the time of grooming, Breck, Danes was unemployed, essentially living in his grandparents' flat, and was in receipt of several welfare benefits.
Danes is taken into custody and interrogated by officers.
He tried to blame Breck and said that Breck was upset because his parents, particularly me, was so horrible. And he went to Danes to be consoled, and then he got upset. I think maybe Danes tried to kiss him, and then he got upset, and so he pulled out a knife. It was him trying to say that it was self-defense, and Breck, tried to hurt him.
He just wants to create this fantasy in his mind, claiming that it was self-defense when he really killed him in cold blood.
Breck was tied up with duct tape. It was just one of his, sort of web of lies.
For ourselves as digital forensics officers, we are responsible for the recovery of data from digital devices and for the processing of that data and then making that available for review to investigators.
Pell and his team need to find a way to recover texts from the waterlogged phones found in Danes' sink.
They did have to be dried out. It's not the moisture causes problems, it's when a device dries out and you have like electrolytes, little conductive elements that then mess with the electronics. We made sure that those devices were dried properly. We got data off the 2 phones. There's another one that wasn't actually working.
The data on the phones offers a string of vital clues.
Danes sent a message to Breck saying, when you come over, you need to tell your dad that you're somewhere else. So Lewis Danes prepped Breck with an answer that he was going to be going to a friend, and he wasn't to tell his dad that he was staying over at his friend's until the night, so that will then give him a chance to then get over to Lewis's and then to be able to keep the deception going.
More recovered texts reveal Danes lied to Breck that he was seriously ill and wanted him to take over his software company. He asked Breck to meet him in person at his home to finalise the details. Pell's team recover other files from Danes' laptop showing this offer was merely bait.
When I look at the sort of date that we had, Lewis did plan this attack. He ordered online condoms and duct tape in the same order. That was at the beginning of 2014.
And these were discovered to have been used during the murder. Premeditation is a distinctive type of murder. It shows that the perpetrator has thought through the act that they're about to commit. It shows that they've committed to carrying out that particular violent crime.
Bodily fluids found at the scene suggest the crime was a depraved sexual act.
And I think for the blood, the saliva, the DNA, all those things point to the fact that it was a sexually motivated murder.
And as investigators explore Dane's school days, they make another grim discovery.
It came to light that as a 15-year-old boy, Danes had been accused of raping another boy. Now, this particular allegation didn't go anywhere. It didn't lead to any convictions at all.
When Lauren had contacted Surrey police 3 months earlier, they had promised to investigate Danes' background. It turned out they had not even run a search on his name.
I think I was pretty angry to think that Dane sexually assaulted another boy because he wasn't punished. I don't think anything happened to him.
An independent police complaints commission report finds that a police national computer check should have been made into Danes' background after Lauren's call, but no checks were carried out. Surrey police admit mistakes were made and pay Breck's family compensation in 2016.
From a mother's perspective, that aspect must be incredibly difficult to reconcile. There were warning signs there, there were red flags there. Breck's mother was shouting her suspicions from the rooftops, and ultimately it fell on deaf ears and serves now as a very stark reminder of the real dangers of online predators.
Danes is charged with murder, but despite the damning dossier of evidence, he continues to insist his actions were justified.
I was furious. The fact that he was claiming self-defense and saying that my brother was down and depressed was just crazy to me. I was horrified to think that people might believe his story.
I was nervous. I hadn't ever been to court for anything. And the first day, the jurors all came in and were chosen, and the pleas were read out, and Dane said not guilty to everything. And yeah, we didn't know what to expect. I think I was scared to see Danes just because I have so much anger and hatred. I never understand when people say they forgive the killer of their children. Like, how could you ever do that? But I guess we're all different. I'll never forgive him.
Breck's parents attend Lewis Danes' trial at Chelmsford Crown Court.
Danes was pleading not guilty. There could have been potentially an element of control in that Danes, deliberately pled not guilty for a long period of time to trouble and disturb Breck's family.
But I think it's probably more likely to be a legal tactic. He was holding out for the last moment in some sort of quite naive hope that evidence would come in that would help exonerate him, which of course it never did.
On his first day in court, Danes dramatically changes his plea.
They brought Danes out and they went through the pleas and he said, guilty. And you could have heard a pin drop. Nobody could believe it because this was a person who spent his whole life lying, telling stories. And all of a sudden, he's not even going to tell his lies in the courtroom. Whereas easy to lie to kids on a computer behind a screen. I don't think he could cope with the idea of having to tell his ridiculous stories in front of a bunch of adults in court.
To the relief of the family, Lewis Danes went guilty, which saved the family giving evidence, which saved the investigation team giving evidence, and it makes that process so much easier for the family.
January of the next year, we had sentencing. And to be honest, that was harder because they had to go through some of the most sort of horrific details to show the depravity and the sexual and sadistic manner in which he had killed Breck.
When he made the call to the police, trying to give some sort of rationale as to why this incident happened. He said that he slashed Breck's throat. The evidence in court by the forensic pathologist said it was almost 4 attempts to cut Breck's neck.
It could well be that Danes had tried to make his sexual feelings clear to Breck. Breck no doubt resisted and as a result, paid with his life for that.
The judge sentences Danes to a minimum of 25 years in jail.
The result was a good result. It felt good. And to be able to investigate, to get good evidence, to be able to support the family and to be able to get justice for the family.
There are a number of factors why somebody like Danes would grow up to be who he was and to do what he did. Certain traumas in childhood can, go into kind of fracturing somebody's identity and personality to an extent that they can themselves carry out harmful acts against other people.
And even from behind bars, Lauren believes Danes' threat to her family hasn't gone away.
He found a way from prison to send messages and tweets and a blog, and he was able to get his voice out, which is completely illegal. And he basically was, again, saying I was a bad mom, saying that all I cared about was raising money. I remember actually feeling really scared at the time because I didn't know if he'd escaped from prison. I thought, did he get out? Are my kids safe? Is he out and looking for the rest of my family?
And her fears are heightened when Lauren's daughter Chloe receives a series of Snapchat messages.
I don't know if it was Lewis. I don't know if it was a random person. He knew the exact location of the grave where Breck was buried. He knew too many details that I feel like wasn't on the news. And he said that Breck was very sexy before he died, and he sent him nudes and asked if I wanted to see them. And then he wanted to speak to my mum as well. He was like, is Lauren there? And it was horrific.
How devastating it must be for Breck's family is re-traumatising. So they've already gone through his horrific murder and that loss. And then to be goaded from prison.
Police investigated, but he had set up a system whereby they couldn't trace it, and he didn't actually get in trouble for it, but hopefully it's in his records for when he tries to get probation. He's never shown remorse. He's never said he's sorry. He's always blamed me, so he's not fit for human consumption.
I like to remember Breck as being the older figure of the siblings, the protector of us three. In our childhood photos, it was always me and the triplets just all in a row, all the same height, and then just Breck was towering over us. I'm not a big fan of some of the ways that people have portrayed Breck online. Some will say that my brother was stupid or dumb. Why would he fall for that? What an idiot for going there and believing those lies when there's just such a simple explanation. He was groomed. It goes to show that even the smartest person can just be completely groomed into believing such ridiculous lies.
I have a theory that a lot of bad things that happen in the world are because of jealousy. And I definitely feel that Danes was jealous of Breck. He knew what he wanted to be. He wanted to be a pilot. He wanted to work in technology. He was focused. He was innately good and handsome and clever and funny. And, I adored that kid.